Back for your ears only, I'm David Alpern with another key news quote of the year. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That was the oft-repeated solution to mass murder proposed by National Rifle Association CEO Wayne LaPierre. Now a different take on the problem from our September 22nd broadcast with co-host Catherine Herzog again.
Our son, Aaron Alexis, has murdered 12 people and wounded several others. I don't know why he did what he did, and I'll never be able to ask him why.
You're not allowed to just go out and tell the world, hey, the patient has some violent tendencies. You've got to have a more specific target.
Kathleen Alexis of Brooklyn had not spent much time with her son Aaron in recent years, but others had. And while he appeared generally genial, there were episodes of angry violence, gunshots, run-ins with police, and finally the admission in Providence, Rhode Island, that he heard voices and feared that strangers were stalking and targeting him with microwaves. Whatever the ethical consideration of medical specialists in such a case, as noted by retired Army psychiatrist Elspeth Cameron Ritchie, Providence police did report that to the naval base where Alexis worked, though the warning apparently went no higher up the chain of command.
But was there more that others could have seen as serious, or at least troubling, and done something about, perhaps leading to restraint of the man who massacred a dozen at the D.C. Navy Yard last week, or at least to withdrawal of the security clearance that gave him access to the base and the building that became his slaughterhouse? To consider mental health, murder, and related issues. For Your Ears Only, we're joined again by Dr. Gregory Jantz, founder of the Center for Counseling and Health Resources Incorporated in Edmonds, Washington, and aplaceofhope.com, ranked number 1 for treatment of depression in one recent survey. His new book is Turning Your Down into Up. Welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you.
In the previous segment, we talked about the failings of the military's security and security clearance systems, including failure to act on the soon-to-be shooter's complaint about hearing voices and being microwaved. If he had said something similar to a family member, friend, or colleague, what action would you recommend?
Well, this is where you've got to trust that intuition. Too often in these situations, we hear people say, I wish I would have. I knew something was wrong. I wish I would have listened to myself. That's what I want you to do. When you hear something that is so out of the ordinary and a person hearing voices, now we know, and let me disqualify, that the majority of people with mental illness are not violent. And in fact, they tend to be more victimized, if anything. But we have situations where if a person feels, and they're delusional, and they feel as though somebody's after them, and they have to respond to it. You know, that's where you cross the line. I'm being tormented. There's somebody after me. I have to respond. When you hear language like that, boy, that's a warning sign.
What is required legally to have a relative or a non-relative committed for observation or at least considered for such commitment?
Well, we have these different mental health laws from state to state, but what we do know is if you suspect that there could be a potential for violence or your life or somebody else's life is endangered, we're going to always err on the side of safety. And so your obligation is to pick up the phone, is to report your concerns, go on record with that, particularly if we know the individual or have had experience with the individual and we've seen a pattern of, we'll call it erratic behavior, a pattern of mental illness, and you begin to hear this person saying different things where it's escalating, please trust yourself.
In the Fort Hood shooting, we've seen that an American Muslim was willing to die for what he felt were valid religious principles. Would you guess that the Navy Yard shooter was targeting what he perceived as enemies or symbols of his enemies? Or was he to some degree seeking suicide by military police to end his psychic pain?
It could go both ways, but one thing to look at is if they feel a sense of persecution, so I'm being persecuted, and I need to respond to that persecution to save either myself or the perception is I'm saving others.
In our new information age, mental health problems, far short of an insanity conviction in a court, could be added to personnel records that feed into databanks for gun purchasers. How far down the ladder do you think it might be practical and useful to go?
Well, I'm for the one for protecting lives and erring again on the side of safety. If you're dealing with a person that's got long-term historic depression and they go in and try to purchase a gun, for example. Would it be good to know that this person has had chronic depression? We're seeing too many situations like this where a person over time decided in the depths of despair and depression to end their life, and I'm going to be one that's going to crusade for saving that life.
Beyond better reading of red flags for prevention of violence, what sort of treatment would you be comfortable seeing to minimize the chance of violence short of incarceration or commitment?
Well, this is a wonderful question to look at because we have too many people right now who really are struggling with mental illness, who end up on the streets. They end up homeless. These people end up in a situation where they are not getting the help they need. Many times, we have resources with medication, but they're not getting the resources that are available.
Moving to the survivors of the Navy Yard shooting, next of kin of the victims there and of the dozen slain days later in a Chicago gang massacre, what are the first few steps or stages for moving forward for them?
Well, the first thing, this is so traumatic and so shocking and so unreal as we just begin to work through the grief. And so we've got the shock of it, and as we begin to look at people who they may have known, how it affects family. So there's just the processing of this, and so we need help doing that. We need help. One of the dangers is in this complex grief that we're experiencing, we may end up becoming self-destructive to our own selves. We get into despair. We get into depression. We may end up self-medicating. We may try to numb ourselves through alcohol or drugs, and we need to be aware of that and the secondary effects of this.
Dr. Gregory Jantz is founder of the Center for Counseling and Health Resources Incorporated in Edmonds, Washington, and aplaceofhope.com, ranked number 1 for treatment of depression in one recent survey. His new book is Turning Your Down into Up.
From our September 22nd broadcast, like the Newtown school massacre at the end of last year and mass murders before and after, the Navy Yard shooting did little to advance tighter federal gun control laws. California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maryland, New Jersey, and New York did enact major reforms to reduce gun violence, but more than 24 other states passed laws that weakened gun control. Vice President Biden announced a $100 million plan to expand mental health services and better enforce related laws already on the books, but many experts said a much greater commitment would be required. Next, Inside the New Oz, for your ears only.